to make a connection with that particular instance, right? How I can do it?
You would basically go to, you need that code
So
that connects the
by
two. I
using
think.
by using what method we can connect with this EC2 instance? Do you remember we make something like a key pair, right?
Yeah, key pair.
Do you remember? Yeah. So basically we use that particular key pair to connect with our EC2 instance, right?
Right.
Yeah. Now let's move forward to other service, right?
hmm
That's a really important one, which is AWS CloudFormation service. And this is basically relates to the CDA certification exam, right?
hmm
And also it is very important field of the DevOps or and also used for the security purposes, right?
hmm
Because what is the purpose of the CloudFormation? First of all, we need to discuss about it, right? Let's suppose if I want to create an EC2 instance, how I can do it? I can go to the EC2 service, right? And
Yes.
after go to the EC2 instance, I can manually click on launch instance, and after clicking on launch instance, I set the property by myself. Everything is like a manual, right? But
hmm
what if your manager says, or if your client says, hey Rafi, you did not deploy the resources manually, right? You have to deploy your resources by using some code, right? So by using that code, we actually means that we are going to use the AWS CloudFormation to deploy our AWS services by code, right? So
hmm
there are two ways in the AWS to deploy services, right? One is manual way, right, in which we actually sign into our console, and after signing into the console, I go to EC2 instance, and after going to instances, I click on launch button. So this is something like a user interface, right? In which you
Yeah.
actually, or we can say the GUI, right? Graphical user interface, in which we clicking the button and selecting the some resources and right. So this is not an automatically way, right? This is not a auto way. It is totally manual way, right? But what if we have a requirement to deploy this particular instance or deploy some other AWS services? Instead of doing manually, we can use it this service, AWS CloudFormation service, in which we actually going to write some code for that particular service. And after writing the code, we are going to deploy this code into AWS, right? By using this service, AWS CloudFormation, right? So
hmm
AWS CloudFormation is simply a service that provide us the facility to deploy our resources on AWS, right? By using infrastructure as code, or we can simply say by using code, right?
Right.
So, okay, we understand that there are two ways. One is manual, one is automated way. If we want to deploy our resources through some code, we use the AWS CloudFormation, right? And if we want to use a manual way, we can easily do it by using the GUI interface of AWS, right? So we understand it, right? But
hmm
the main question is that, and very important question is that, uh, why we need to deploy our resources through code? Why if we have a way of deploying resources through console, so why we can use this particular method like deploying resources through code? Did you have answer of this?
Why would we do it manually? You're asking, right?
No, why we do through infrastructure as code means why we need to deploy our AWS resources through code, right? Instead of doing manually. Means we have two ways,
Well,
right? One is manual, second one is code, right? But why we use this way to writing a code for this service instead of doing it manually?
Well, some people may not know how to do it manually. Like if you're not a programmer or developer, you would not know how to do all that using command prompt and blah blah blah.
No, so basically this is not a, this is, we don't need any type of the language to deploy our code. We are going to use some formal JSON and YAML language for it, right? And that is not particularly a programming language, right? This is basically used for the only deployment of AWS resources, right? For this,
Yeah.
you didn't know about, you didn't, have a knowledge related to it. But I am asking what is the main differences between them, right? Let's suppose you have a knowledge of YAML and JSON, right? Now, what is the actual need to deploy the AWS resources through code instead of doing it manually?
If you do it through code, you can do, I mean, you can, I guess, you can version control, you can do continuous integration, continuous deployment.
Mhm.
All
So
those different things are
basically,
much easier to control by doing it via code rather than using the GUI.
So basically the main reason is that to deploy our code or deploy our services through code is that when we're using a code, so we can do the automate things, right? If I want to change anything related to instance, I just change into my code, and after changing in the code, I just push into it, right?
Yeah.
What if your boss said you have to change your some changes in EC2 instance, but instead of doing through code, you do it manually. So it takes your time, right? So first thing is that. And second, the most important thing is that let's suppose I gave you a task. Hey Rafi, you have to make 100 instances. So how you can do it?
It'll be very difficult to set up these 100 things on using manually like this. So that
Yes,
scenario, you can do it a
100%.
lot faster with code.
Definitely. That is the main purpose of using the AWS CloudFormation, right? So in our always remember that when we are working on some projects, right? So we
Mhm.
using or we deploy our AWS services using this AWS CloudFormation code, right?
Mhm.
So the main purpose is that we have all the specs in the form of code, right? And
Yeah.
we can deploy as many services by using this code, right? So if
Right.
if if we have a requirement of deploying the 100 of the instances, we can deploy the 100 of instances by using only one file, right? We just
Yeah.
need to call this file again and again, and we are able to create this instance, right? But if your manager asks you, you have to deploy these 100 instances by using manually your graphical user interface. So it is really a hectic task, right? You have to click on launch instance again and again, make a security group, make a different key pairs, right? So, it is
Right.
really a hectic task, right?
Yes.
So now you can tell me using the cloud formation, we deploy AWS services using a code, right? And this
Yes.
code is in the form of, come on.
It's in the form of a no,
So there are two languages
JSON
yes,
and
we are going to
XML.
use in it. YAML, JSON and YAML, right? But
YAML,
we are,
YAML, right?
YAML. But we are going to utilize only one language for it, YAML, right? Why we can't use the JSON? Do you know? The braces related to it. So let's wait for it. So this language currently show in this text, this is basically a YAML language, right?
Mhm.
And what is the different type of JSON? JSON is basically something like a braces, this one, right?
Mhm.
So in JSON language, we have some braces, colon, commas, brackets, right? But in the YAML, we don't want to use any, braces or any extra colons, commas, right, for it, right? So this
Mhm.
is, can you please tell me what is uh mainly focus, or we can say the most human readable form? This one or this one? What do you say?
Go down.
Which one is most human readable form? This
Go
one or
down.
this one? This one. This is the YAML and this is the JSON. So what do
Jason.
you think?
Jason is identifying.
And Jason, so let's suppose if I had given you a task, right? So you have to make easy to instance through this language, right? So if you had done some mistake in the braces, you found an error, right? So because you miss these braces, you miss these commas, you miss this double quotation. So if you missed any of the little thing, your code will give you some error, right? So it is really hectic to manage this type of the language, right? So that's why we are using this language, means YAML form. So this is really easy language because we cannot use any type of the extra braces, commas, double quotation in it, right? So
Oh,
that's
okay,
why,
I see. I didn't see
yeah.
that the bottom one identified the courses as math and science. I just thought it just said like math and science, didn't really say what they were. So I was
So
using that.
you didn't focus on the what is actually written. You just need to focus on the language's structure, right? So this
Mm,
structure, maybe it is easy to understand it. It is easy to readable, but it is not easy to writeable, right? So that's why we are not going to write our code in the form of JSON, right? So that's why
mm,
we usually use this YAML file.
mm,
Let me show you some files. So this is my one of the project files, right? Which I write in the CloudFormation that we are currently discuss about it, right?
mm,
So this whole project files or whole project services are creating through CloudFormation, and the language which we utilize is totally YAML form, not a JSON form, right? So let's pause. Let me just close all the tabs so you can easily see this. So basically, can you please tell me that what is the main purpose of using the AWS CloudFormation?
Uh,
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
have a way to put our code on the web.
No, so the main purpose of using AWS CloudFormation is that you can easily deploy your AWS services through code. Simple is that, right?
Right.
Instead of doing manually, right? Now we are discussing about some language we are going to utilize for deploying our resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I said you this is the CloudFormation templates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I made to deploy AWS services. The folder the currently you are seeing is basically the services name, AWS services name, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
suppose ACM is AWS service name, chatbot is AWS service name, CloudWatch is AWS service name, code build, code pipeline, CodeStar, EC2 instance, ECR, EKSI. So this all of that are AWS services, right? So
Yeah.
instead of creating these services manually, I prefer to doing it using the code, right? And
Yeah.
how I can write this code? I wrote this code by using the one of the AWS service whose name is AWS CloudFormation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in AWS CloudFormation, we write our code in the form of
YAM.
yes, YAML, or
Oh,
we can simply say YAML, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So let's suppose this is the YAML form, right?
What does
So
YAML stand for? What something markup language? What is Y?
Uh, I don't know the full name of the YAML, but this language we can say the very simply simplified form of the language, right? Without any extra quotation or without any extra, commas or something like that, right?
Something
So
assertion
human
markup
readable language,
language.
assertion markup language.
Yeah, but I don't know what the Y stands for.
maybe we can, okay, we can search for it, but YAML aren't markup language. Yet another. Here is the YAML means. Yet another markup language. This form is meant to underscore the language is standard for data rather than document. That is code YAML is designed. So this is basically the language that is particularly designed for simplicity and readability. Just remember these words, right? So basically we actually write our code in this form because we need our code, we need to write our code in a very simplest way and readable form, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
why we using this particular language for creating the CloudFormation template for AWS services, right? So this is one of the example I created EC2 using the AWS CloudFormation template, right? So what does it mean by template? So everything you can create on AWS CloudFormation is in the form of template. So template is basically a file, right? In which
Yes.
your AWS resource code are located, right? Let's suppose this EC2 app.yaml. .yaml is an extension, right? That's mean this extension tell me that this EC2 app file is basically in the YAML form, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we can hold this whole particular name, we can say it EC2 template, right? EC2 template means EC2 file, right? In which your
Mm-hmm.
actual AWS resource code are located, right? In which you are
Yeah.
actually creating the EC2 instance, right? So this is basically a particular EC2 instance code in the form of YAML. Here you can see there are multiple lines of the code, 124 lines of the code, and it is very easy to write this code, right? I will tell you how, right? So basically, if we can talk about if we wrote this code in the form of JSON, then it is not really easy to understand and also it is not easy to write, right? Because in the form of the JSON we need to add some braces, like for example in this EC2 instance we need to add these braces, something like that, right? So we don't want to add many braces in our code because we want a very simplicity. So that's why we actually utilizing the YAML form, right? So
Right.
this is the main purpose. Now could you please tell me what is the advantage of using the cloud formation?
So that you can easily um
Yes.
use your use Amazon services on the cloud
Use,
and
not a use, deploy, right? Means
deploy.
we deploy our AWS services easily using this AWS CloudFormation, right? And
Yeah.
the main advantage is that
The main
what?
advantage is so that we can create and access many different services
Yes,
easily,
deploy, we can deploy multiple services very quickly, right?
very quickly. Yeah.
Instead of doing the manual way. So this is the main advantage of that, right? And let's suppose we can
This is the main
easily
advantage of what? The AWS cloud?
so yeah, so no, the main advantage of using AWS CloudFormation, right? I'm not talking about cloud, right? So
Cloud formation.
CloudFormation is basically AWS services that provide us the facility to deploy your AWS services on AWS by using code, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the basically CloudFormation is AWS service that we can utilize to deploy some resources on AWS by using code, right? And this code is written in the form of YAML, right? So basically the main advantage, one advantage is that by using the CloudFormation, we can deploy new resources, any resources. And second advantage is that reduce the configuration error, means any type of, what is it mean by the configuration error? So let's suppose while creating an instance through manual way, maybe you click some buttons that you don't want to click, right? Let's suppose if I have some instance, right? By using this interface, let's suppose I just mistakenly delete the instance, right? Because I'm using the GUI, right? So that's really make a problem for me, right? Because I delete the instance, very unintentionally, right? So that's definitely create a problem for us, for our organization, right? So that's why that's the also the purpose of using or deploy your resources through codes, right? And whatever you want to make changes in it, you can done it by code, right? For
Hmm.
example, if I deploy this instance through this file, right? So now I want to make some updates or I want to make some changes in it, right? So instead of
Hmm.
doing manually, I can update it by using this code, right?
Right.
Let's suppose if I want to change in this particular file, right? I want to change instance time instead of T3. I want to write it T4, right? Something like that. So whatever the changes you want to made in your resources, or we can say AWS services, you can done by using the code instead of manually, right?
Yes.
So for this, what advantage we can achieve for by doing this?
Um, I mean, you can change the code easily. You can write new code. You can deploy it faster. You can access a lot of different services that quickly. You can, you know.
No, I am actually talking about instead of deploying resources manually, instead of update resources manually, we update it through code. Why?
Oh, why is this? Because we can do it faster. Like it's faster. You
Yes,
can do a lot of them.
we
You
can
can
do faster,
make
and
mass
also there
actions.
is no chance of deleting the instance or setting very vulnerable properties, right? For example, if I make this instance through this AWS console, or we can say GUI interface, right? So let's suppose I mistakenly click on some delete buttons or delete my instance, right? So that's make a really problem for me, right?
Hmm.
So because in the code there is no manual intervention or manual interruption is involved, right? So what we do is totally using the code, right? So that's why it is the biggest advantage of using this.
Right.
And when usually we work on the dev or something like a production environment, we always use this method, right?
Got it.
Even every organization use this method, right? But they utilize the different services according to their organization. For example, in my organization I usually used AWS CloudFormation to deploy the AWS services on AWS, right?
Hmm.
But let's suppose in USA, let's suppose 50% of the organization uses another services, for example, Terraform, right? Maybe you know about something like a Terraform. So
Yeah, I
Terraform is
heard of it.
also a tool or a service that provide us the same facility that provided by AWS CloudFormation, right?
Hmm.
Means we can
Is Terraform
deploy
like the Microsoft version of that, or what? What is the difference?
so the main difference is between the AWS CloudFormation or Terraform is that first of all, what are the similarities? Both services or both tools are basically helped us to deploy our resources on AWS, right? Like if I want to create an EC2 instance through code, I can also deploy through CloudFormation, and I also create through the Terraform, right? Means
Hmm.
both of these tools are provide same type of the services, same type of the facilities, right? But what are the main difference? Like some organization using AWS CloudFormation for deploying their resources, some organization uses the Terraform for deploying their resources. Why? Because the main difference between the Terraform and AWS CloudFormation is that AWS CloudFormation is only specific to AWS, right? But
Terraform is what?
yeah, Terraform. So AWS CloudFormation is only specifically for AWS, but the Terraform is basically not specific to AWS. We can use the Terraform for any cloud provider. Let's suppose if I want to make some resources on Azure or in Google Cloud or maybe in other third-party cloud provider, I can easily deploy the resources using the Terraform, right? So Terraform
Terraform is a
has,
generic version, whereas
yes, for multiple cloud provider. Yeah.
okay.
And but the AWS CloudFormation is basically is
Only
relevant to
for
only
AWS.
AWS. Yeah, only for
Mm,
AWS, right? That is the main difference, right? And also we have a third service with the name of CDK, right? It is also the same service that will help us the same facility, right? To
mm-hmm,
deploy our AWS resources through infrastructure as code, right?
mm-hmm.
But now we have three of services. One is CloudFormation, Terraform, and CDK. And what is the advantage of the CDK? That is totally different, right? So CDK is also used. CDK is just like a Terraform and AWS CloudFormation that help us facility to deploy our resources on AWS, and it has also provided facility to deploy our resources on other cloud platforms, same like a Terraform, right? Means we can
Yeah.
use the CDK to deploy our resources on Azure, on Google Cloud, or AWS, or other third-party cloud providers, right? But now, what is the difference between Terraform and CDK? So basically, in CDK,
Wait, hold on.
uh,
CDK?
CDK, yeah, CDK.
What does that stand for?
Cloud Development Kit, right? CDK stands for Cloud Development Kit. It is a tool that basically we utilize to deploy our AWS resources or other cloud provider resources, right? By using the infrastructure as code, right? So this is the basically main advantage of CDK. So what is the difference between Terraform and CDK? So Terraform is also provide us a facility
So the
to
CDK is something different from Cloud Formations?
so so this service, these three of the services has purpose is same, because they are actually provide us the facility to deploy our AWS services on AWS by using some code, right? But all of three tools has some advantages and some limitations, right? There are some difference between them, right? Same like a difference between CloudFormation and Terraform. I just gave you a difference between Terraform and AWS. Do you remember? Could you please tell me what is the main difference between CloudFormation and Terraform? Then we discuss between the difference between Terraform and CDK, right? So first of all, you need to tell me what is the difference between CloudFormation and Terraform. I just tell you.
Cloud Formation is only for AWS, Terraform is for any other cloud provider.
Yes. And Terraform is for,
Any cloud
yes,
service.
we, what does it mean by any cloud provider? Like what type of the facility provide?
GCP, Azure,
Yeah, what resources we made through this?
what resources?
Yeah. Like what type of the resources were deployed on the cloud provider by using this tool?
The different types of services provided by the cloud provider, such as
Yes.
Amazon Web Services,
Yeah, we can
Google
deploy
Cloud
any type of the
Services.
services. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Now, what is the main difference between Terraform and CDK, right? So the main difference is that in CDK, we can use any type of the programming language, right? Let's put Python, Java, Node, TypeScript, any programming language you can use to deploy your resources on any cloud provider, right? So CDK is basically designed for developers, right? So because most of the developers are not working on, JSON, YAML, or in Terraform, we use the HCL language, right? So most of the developers are not working in these languages, right? Because these
Mm-hmm,
languages are relevant to some DevOps field, right?
mm-hmm,
So they most of the developers are working on their own languages. Some are Python master, some are Java master, right? So that's why CDK tool is made, right? To deploy these AWS services by using some programming languages, right?
mm-hmm,
So that's why the CDK tool made, right? But in CloudFormation, we use the JSON and YAML form, and in Terraform, Terraform has their own language with the name of HCL, right? It is same like a YAML form, right? But little bit a different one, right? But in CDK, we can use any programming language. There is no language restriction for it, right? So that's why some company prefer CDK to deploy their resources on cloud, right? But some company or organization prefers Terraform, right? and some companies, prefer AWS CloudFormation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is the main difference. And these three topics and these three difference are extremely important for certification, right? So you know very well related to this particular difference, right? So now let's start it. How we can create some services using the AWS CloudFormation, right? So let's suppose move into some other region where we had nothing. Okay, so let me go to Strandify or any other section. Okay, so this is the AWS CloudFormation, right? If we
One second.
want to,
1 second, Zain.
okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So basically now I am in the AWS CloudFormation service, right?
Mhm.
So let's start it how we can create some resources through this service, right? By using
Yeah.
code, right? So first of all, you need to make a folder in your local, right? Uh, let's suppose I am going to create this folder anywhere, but I want to prefer on my C disk, users, public. Here, let's suppose I create some folder here, right? With the name of CloudFormation, right?
Yeah.
And after creating this folder, I want to make some services, AWS services in it, right? So let's suppose in this lecture we are going to create, let's suppose S3 bucket using the AWS CloudFormation, means using a code, right? Instead of doing it manually, right? So first of
Mhm.
all, we need to make a YAML file, right, for this. So
Mhm.
how we can create a YAML file? So you can create a YAML file by just clicking on this and you can name it
.yaml.
yeah, YAML. We need to make an extension of YAML, and also first of all you need to write a meaningful name of this file, right? So basically what we are creating?
YAML file.
No, we are creating what service? S3 bucket, right?
Bucket.
So you have to make a name of your YAML according to your service which you are actually create, right? So currently I am telling you I want to create a S3 bucket instead of creating manually or instead of creating through GUI, I want to create it through code, right? So first of all, I have to make a YAML file for it, right? So that's why I just name it S3 bucket, and after that you have to write a YAML, right? So it is not made in a YAML form, it is a text form. We need to change its style. Where we can change the type if we are able to do this. So there is one way is that okay, just close with this CloudFormation. Okay, open in your CMD or dot. Basically, I just open this particular CloudFormation folder into my Visual Studio Code, right? Do you remember in our first of the classes we discussed about this editor, right? Visual Studio Code editor. So basically,
Yes.
this folder is now open in my Visual Studio Code editor, right? So I want to create a new file because this file is in the text form. I don't need to create in the text form. I want to create in a YAML form, right? So you can create a new file by clicking on new file, right? And name this file according to your requirement. So I want to create a S3 bucket and in the YAML form, right? So I name it YAML, right? So now this is the YAML file, right?
Yes.
Once I created a file with the name of particular services you want to create, right? After that, you need some AWS CloudFormation template for it, right?
Right.
Because we are going to use the AWS CloudFormation template to creating the S3 bucket instead of doing it manually, right? So
Yes.
how you can find this code? So this is really easy, right? Because AWS provide you pre-configured template for every services, right? So you just need to search for it, right? How you can search? Just follow me. So first of all, you have to go your browser, any browser, right?
Yeah.
After that, just go a little bit down. Here you can see the AWS documentation, right? And after AWS documentation, just click on this AWS S3 bucket.
Hmm.
So this is basically a pre-configure, we can say, uh, pre-built templates that created the AWS for you, right? But in this template, we have load of properties, right? So first of all, when you successfully open this particular documentation, you you go to the filter, right? So we need to add a filter of what? Because we need a template in the form of
YAML.
YAML. Why? Because we want to create our code in the form of YAML, right? So there is no need of a JSON. So just click on YAML. So it automatically filter the only YAML text for you, right? So now here is the basically the YAML template to creating the S3 bucket, right? So here you can see there are lot of properties, right? Acceleration, configuration, lot of properties, right? And in these properties, we also have some sub properties, right? That's mean if I am go to with this all of that properties, then it took my lot of time, right? And in the actual scenario, we are not going towards with all of the properties. We only going to utilize only those properties which is our actual requirement, right?
Hmm.
So let's suppose I want to create S3 bucket only with the name bucket name. And let's suppose also I want to use a property of public access and versioning, something like that, right? So you just need to configure out what type of the properties you want and what type of the properties you want to skip, right? You can easily configure it, right? And if you want to check what does it property means, right? Let's suppose I am in AWS S3 bucket template, and here is the one property with the name of accelerate configuration, right? And I didn't understand what does this property do and what does it property means, right? So you just need to click on this accelerate configuration, so it automatically move on into the some description related to that particular property, right? So now it says accelerate configuration is basically transfer acceleration state from S3 bucket, right? And if you want to want to see the more details related to this property, you can go to this link, right? So basically every property has some documentation if you want to explore it, like what this property do and what is the behavior of this property, right? Because if you remember when we created the S3 bucket into the console, we go to the S3 bucket, right? And after going to the S3 bucket, we just click on the some create bucket, and after it automatically opens some properties for us, right? Let's suppose if I am going to click on this create bucket, right? So this is the GUI way, right? In which he says you need to write a bucket name, right? But in the form of code, here you can see that the bucket name property is this one, right? So every GUI property he wrote in the form of some code, right? In the form of
Mm-hmm.
some template, right? You just need to pick out important properties or important text, and you can make a template for these properties, right? So let's suppose I make a bucket name when I use the GUI way and object ownership, public access, versioning, tags. So you can use this particular whole important properties or whatever you want to use it, right, in your template. Here, this is the all properties you see here. All of the details are in it, right? Like what this property do, SS control, all of this property has a description in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now in the end we have examples. We can also filter out by using this. Let's suppose if I want to see the syntax, I click on this syntax button, right? If
Mm-hmm.
I want to see some properties, I go to the properties button. If I want to see some return value, so return value is basically the output form, right? Once our bucket is made, it gives us some return value like, okay, your bucket is created, here is your bucket link, right? So this is the return value. And after that, we have some examples template, right? Example templates is basically the templates which you can utilize to create your S3 on bucket, right? Just making some changes in this particular pre-configured templates, right? So this is the one example. So here you can see this. In this example, our bucket is created, right? And this bucket is successfully created without any load of properties. In this example, we utilized only one property with the name of bucket name, only one, right? And
Mm-hmm.
only this property are going to create our S3 bucket by all default properties options, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and after that, in the end, we also have some other examples, right? Now he created the S3 bucket with a lot of properties, right? In which you use the replication configuration property, tools, type, policies, right? So here you can see that he utilized the different type of the properties here, right? And here is another example. So in which he utilized something like a 4 to 5 properties to create a S3 bucket, and then he attach a bucket policy for it, right? So this is basically the pre-built template that you can utilize for this, right? Let's suppose I want to create a S3 bucket. So I am going to just copy this text, right? And you just need to copy this text and paste this text into your YAML file, right? Here, here you have to do the same thing which I just done, right? So I just go to the template and pick some text or properties from that template, and you just need to paste it here. Right now I can change it by myself, right? Let's suppose instead of writing the bucket name this dog example bucket, I want to make some meaningful name for it, right? For example, I want to write uh, DevOps training bucket Rafi, right? So I want to name in this form, right? And also whenever you creating some resources through the CloudFormation, you have to add some text in the upper portion, right? Let's suppose there is some text relevant to the template version. So this is the text you must include in your template, right? So currently we doesn't have AWS template version, so we need some template version. So we can pick it. Just open any folder and just see where what the default YAML file. So first of all, there are some template format version, right? That is must you have to include in your template, right? So I am going to write this template version, right? And also the template version, we have some parameter, but for this use case, we are not going to utilize the parameter. This is not a compulsory. And after that, we have resources. And in the end, we have output section, right? And in output section, we have three of the values. Okay. So we are going to utilize three of the properties, right? Let me add some space to easily understand this, right? Okay. So first of all, we have AWS template format version, right? This version is going to be the same for every template, right? So whenever you create some CloudFormation template, you just need to include first line as it is. AWS template format version, some version, right? After that, you need to add your resources, right? And what does it mean by the resources? So basically in resources tab, you actually say your AWS, hey, I want to create this resource. What resource? S3 bucket resource, right? And you have to select default type option. So this is basically you don't need to make any changes in this particular line, fifth line type, right? Because this line tell the AWS you actually create the S3 bucket, right? And after that we have some property deletion policy retain. So this is basically a policy which we use. This means that when we delete the S3 template, but our bucket policy is still remain, right? So if I don't want to use this property, I can also remove this one, right? So we can manage it by ourselves, right? And then we have a properties. In properties tab, we are actually going to utilize these properties to make our bucket, right? So first of all, I just write
Let me
only
okay,
one.
let's pause for a second.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I'm learning anything from this, man. This is way
Mm-hmm.
too technical and lecture after
Yeah,
lecture after lecture. It's just you're showing me stuff, I'm listening, and I guess I
yeah,
think
I
that this
know.
is not really bringing that much value this way. I think we need to
Uh-huh.
do one section of something, then you need to let me do it myself so I can engage with this content, and then
Uh-huh. Yeah, I
quiz
know.
test me until I can show you that I've learned that concept, and then move on to the
Mm-hmm.
next concept, because I don't think I'm learning. Like every day you're asking me, what did you learn yesterday? I don't think I learned anything because I'm not
Mm-hmm.
engaging with this content. It's not something that I'm familiar with. It is highly
Okay,
technical and it is not really,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
uh,
I know it, but first time it is,
it's, yeah, it's way too, it's like if I was
mm,
teaching you 30 moves
Mm-hmm.
of chess opening theory right now, and you've just learned how to play chess yesterday. You
Yeah,
could
yeah, I
listen to that
understand.
all day, but they wouldn't really click. So I think we need to
Okay.
structure these to
Mm-hmm.
where you give me one, you show me one thing, maybe for 30 minutes. Then the next
Right.
30 minutes, I do that one thing. And you drill me until you
Okay.
know that I understood that
Hmm.
one concept, and then we finalize that concept.
Okay, so
Then
so
next one.
so you can share your screen, and what we had done so far, you can do it yourself, right?
Okay.
So just share your screen, please.
Yeah, because this is just something I have no
Yeah, I
familiarity with
know.
at
I
all. So
know
it's just like,
it is somewhat technical field. It is,
yeah.
you know. I know when I learned this whole thing first time, I am very.
Okay.
So we don't need to make an instance through manually. We will now want to create an instance or any other AWS service is using CloudFormation, right? So if you want to explore or if you want to go the AWS CloudFormation service, how you can do it? How you can go to the AWS CloudFormation service? Yes, going to the search bar and just write CloudFormation. No, this is a cloud map, CloudFormation, yeah. So this is the service that is basically we use to deploy any type of AWS resources on AWS by using code, right? So currently, you see some of the templates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to touch any template here because this is a pre-configured template, account template that is deployed by AWS itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to create our own stacks or our own templates to create our own AWS services, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's suppose your manager gives you a task. Here, Rafi, you have to create a S3 bucket on AWS. Now you can tell me how many ways you have to create a S3 bucket on AWS.
Two ways.
Yes, and what ways? Can you please explain, elaborate this ways?
One is via using the GUI here and clicking
Yeah,
around and using the service
yeah.
here to build it.
And second one is
Otherwise, is to use
this
it.
service, AWS CloudFormation service, right?
Well, that's the
Right?
one where you write the code and then you do it through
Yes,
code on your local machine
yes.
using what GitHub, what
So
code.
currently, no, you just need to write a code in your local, and after writing a code into your local, you just need to upload on your local file into this CloudFormation
And you
template.
upload it
Just
how? Using what?
so we can upload it into the two ways. One is by using a command, and second one is by clicking on create stack option, right? In the if you can click on the create stack in the very right hand, you see the button in a blue. Yeah, just click on it and go to the with new resource.
This one?
First one, new resource. And here you can see go to the upload a template file, second option in specify template, upload a template. Yeah, this here you are going to upload a click on choose file. So if you have a file, right? So you can upload it here, and after uploading, go to the next and your CloudFormation is template is not going to be deployed, right?
So
So
there is
this
no
is
way to
the
set up the continuous CDCI pipeline for this, like we did for the other thing.
sorry.
Okay, every time you want to make changes to your code and upload the new file, you have to do this manually. There's no way to automatically push this
Yeah,
code.
yeah, we have automatic way. Like we can use the CLI, right? Means command line interface for it, right? We just need to write a one command, and after writing this command, our infrastructure automatically going into be creating state, right? So we are going to discuss about this command once we make a template, right? So there are two ways to deploy your infrastructure, or we can say deploy our template or stack into the AWS cloud, right? So currently we didn't have any type of the stack or any type of the template right now, right? So that's mean we need to create a template, right? What does it mean by template? Template is basically your service, right? Service code. right? So currently my manager give me a task to create a S3 bucket, right? So if I want to create a S3 bucket, I need to write a S3 bucket template for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your manager gives you a task here, Rafi, you need to create an EC2 instance, then what you are going to be right?
Huh? You're gonna be what?
If your manager says you need to create an EC2 instance, right? So what you are going to be right? You
What am
are
I going
going
to
to write,
write?
yeah, you are going to write a EC2 template, right? If your
Right.
manager says, hey, Rafi, you have to create a CI/CD pipeline, right? So you can create a CI/CD pipeline template for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because template is basically, we can say, a code, your service code, AWS resources service code, right?
Mm-hmm.
So currently we didn't have a template for to deploy into this service, right? So first of all, we need to make a template, right? And how we can make a template?
By going and writing, typing up template and seeing
Yes,
getting a
by
schema
writing,
and changing it.
yeah, yeah. So first of all, you need to go into any local folder where you want to create this template. Yes.
Open
So
a
just
text document.
make a folder. So could you please tell me or follow the way which I followed earlier to create a bucket? Do you remember?
Um,
Hmm.
I remember.
So first of all, so how I can get the S3 bucket template, or we can say S3 bucket code
Okay.
pre-configure or pre here you can see lot of properties and lot of text here, right? So we need to filter some text, right? So currently there are JSON files is also included in that, but in that particular template, right? We need
Yeah.
only YAML template. So how we can filter it? So here you can see the option with the name of filter view. Yeah, you just click on YAML, right? Now our text all is in the YAML form, right? Now here you can see there are a lot of properties for the S3 bucket, right? We don't want to use all of these properties to creating the S3 bucket, right? We just need to pick some properties that are really, really relevant to our requirement, right? And
Yeah.
we just need to pick these properties and use in our template, right? So let's suppose this all of these properties has some meanings and some used in the S3 bucket, right? But I don't want to create S3 bucket with all of these properties. I just need to create a S3 bucket with some of the properties according to my need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can go to the examples template. So you can pick some example template and paste this template into your template to create a S3 bucket, right? So in the very right side, you see the option syntax properties, return value examples. So if you want to go to the example, you just need to click on examples, right? So and just go a little bit down. The first example is create an S3 bucket, right? So this is the basically code to create a S3 bucket, right? So this is basically a pre-built code provided by AWS, right, in the form of documentation, right? So we just need to pick this code or copy this code, and after that we can easily utilize this code into our template, right? So just copy this and paste into your template which you made earlier. Yeah, just paste it in, right? So this code is basically what tells us, right? So currently in the first line you see the resources, right? So resources means what type of the resources you want to make, right? So I tell him in the second line that I want to make a resource of S3 bucket, right? So this second line, this is the user defined name, means I can name it according to my own, right? I can write the S3 Rafi bucket or something like that, right? But the first one is the building. You have no permission to change this property, resources property, right? Second one, I can change it, right? This is the user defined property. And
Mm-hmm.
in the third line, you see the option type, right? So this type is basically tell us what type of the bucket you want to make. You just tell him that I want to create a S3 bucket, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
why this, and this one is also not going to be changed. This is going to be pre-built, and if you make some changes in it, it will give you error, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a fourth line, you have option of deletion policy. It is also a pre-configure or pre-built, property. That's mean deletion policy retain means even if I delete this template, my S3 bucket are not going to be deleted, right? It is still located on my AWS account, right?
Okay, so
So,
the S3 bucket, I can explain again what exactly we're doing right now. Basically, is that we are trying
mm,
to uh s-
so just simple as that. We are trying to do create a S3 bucket by using code, right?
okay,
And
but
our code,
explain again what is the purpose of all of this, like overall from the high level, working down to the
yeah,
granular.
yeah, high level purpose is that because in CDA certification we have some question or relevant question related to AWS CloudFormation, right? So that's why we need to practice. But not we are not going to go very deep in this, right? We are just focusing on the very high level concept, like what is AWS CloudFormation, and in the earlier we discussed about what is the difference between CloudFormation, Terraform, CTK, right? So that's the actual question we are actually focused on, right? And for the example, we just create the S3 bucket by using the AWS CloudFormation, but we are not going to going so much deep in it, right? Because in CDS certification, we just need to focus on high level services and focus on high level concepts, right? That's the
Okay,
actual
so what
main
we're
purpose
trying
of
to do here, I mean, what is the purpose of all this? Like we're trying to
it.
take
Mhm.
data, I mean, code, or like I'm
Mhm.
confused on what do we do this for? Like you need to explain to me what is the purpose
Mhm.
of doing all this? Why does one do this? To do
This
what?
code.
What is the what is the user story of this? I, as a
Mm,
blank, would like to do blank so that I can do blank.
user story. What does it mean? I don't understand. What do you say?
Okay. I, as a user of AWS, would like to create
Hmm.
CloudFormation so that I can do what? Why are we doing all?
Okay.
What is the purpose of all this?
So the main purpose of that, you actually creating a S3 bucket using a code, and once you have want to create a bucket or any resource through code, you have to use the AWS CloudFormation service, right? So you are actually utilizing the AWS CloudFormation service, but before utilizing the AWS CloudFormation service, you need a template, right? So currently we are making a template for our AWS CloudFormation to make S3 bucket, right?
Okay,
So
go even higher
currently,
level than that. What of
Morano.
the
Hmm.
which of okay, so we're trying to use some services of AWS. Which
Right.
service are we trying to use to do what?
We are going to create a S3 bucket, which is one of the AWS service, right?
What is that used
And
for?
it is you, huh? Okay, it is basically used for the object storage. For example, in my project, I have a web server or a web application, right? And to deploy our web application in AWS, we need to utilize a multiple services. For example, mostly our front end is deployed on the S3 bucket, right? And so for deployment of the S3 bucket, we need a S3 bucket, right? So that's why we are going to create a S3 bucket, right? So if in our requirement, I want to deploy my application on EC2 server. So for this, I have to make a template or CloudFormation template for the EC2 server because I need a EC2 server for my application, right? So it is totally depend upon your requirement, your application requirement, like what type of the services you need to make, right? So let's suppose what is the purpose of creating a CI/CD pipeline to automate the things, right? So when we need a automate CI/CD pipelines, so there are two ways to creating this. One is manual and second one is this code, right? So we make the services according to our projects. That's the main or high level of it, or main purpose of this services creating. Do you understand?
Okay, I'm
Mm-hmm. Actually, you are
so
you are just confused, yeah.
okay. So I'm not familiar with all the different services of AWS and what do people use it for.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you're not understanding how little my knowledge on this is. So you need to
Mm-hmm.
break it down like even more basic level. Like
Okay.
what is that? Also you're not using any examples. I think you should use examples, real life examples that I can relate to that would help me
Right.
to understand these concepts. Like,
Okay.
you know,
Okay, instead of going to directly to the AWS cloud formation, I think we
like
make
I'm
some
not
more.
understanding the purpose behind these technical things. Like you're not relating it back
Right.
to a real life example or a
Right,
scenario,
right, right,
nothing like
right,
that I can relate to. Like I'm learning it
right.
just
So let's
pure.
suppose you can relate this S3 bucket in a real-time scenario in the form of, let's suppose I need a storage to store my some files, videos, or a lot of data, right?
Mhm,
So I am just looking up for a particular or many options. I found that we have one option, Google Drive, right? Second option, Dropbox, right? And third option is AWS S3 bucket. That is also basically a storage. It is just a simply a storage where you can
mhm.
store your files, videos, or any text data, any type of the data in it, right? So after exploring these three options, I comes up with AWS S3 bucket because I know it is cheap and I store hundreds of GBs of the files in it, right, in a very low cost, right?
Mhm.
So now this particular service is located on AWS, right? And to creating this service, I have to go into the AWS account, right? So once I go to the AWS account, now I have two options. Either I can create this bucket manually by clicking on the buttons and using the GUI, and the second one is CloudFormation, right? Means using a code to create this bucket
So
using a
S3
code.
bucket is a storage for code.
Yes, storage, not a storage for code, it is storage for your files, any type of the files, images, or we can say videos, something like that, right? But it is not a storage for your actual code, right? Because because we cannot store our application code in it, right? We store only the file or our pictures or something like that in it. For example, I will give you example. Let's suppose I have application, maybe a Facebook, right? So in the Facebook application, the code, let's suppose the Facebook application is made by Python code, right? So the main code of the application, Python one, is located on GitHub, right? Or any other version control system, but not in the S3 bucket. But what type of the Facebook files are going to be located on the S3 bucket? These files are basically the pictures or logo of your Facebook, right? So we can take the example of Rafi Chowdhury website, right? For example, the Rafi Chowdhury website, our overall Rafi's pictures, overall Rafi's website's pictures are located on S3 bucket, right? But in the backend code, PHP code are not going to be located in S3 bucket. This code are basically we push into some version control system, which is GitHub, AWS code commit, or some other services, right?
So
So
like you can this is basically equivalent to like I don't know, just
just a
like
storage,
you
object
have
storage.
Jira and Confluence. Jira is where you manage your tickets. Confluence is where you store all your documentation. It's that kind of thing. It's a
Yeah,
storage
that's
thing.
kind of thing. That's kind of thing, yeah. We can say GitHub is for code storage and S3 bucket is for file storage,
Okay,
right?
got it.
Simple is that. Google Drive, where you store your files, videos, any type of the files here, right? So same like a Google Drive, we have a AWS S3 bucket, right?
Okay,
And for storing our code, we have GitHub, GitLab, or any third party, right? So
right.
that's the main difference. So you just need to explore this S3 bucket, and in this lecture we are focused on mainly there are two ways to creating resources on AWS. One is manual, second is this, and we make some differences between AWS CloudFormation, Terraform, and CDK. And after that, we just follow up some, CloudFormation, what is CloudFormation, what is the advantage of it, right? So I don't want to extend into, into a difficult lecture. So I decided to make this lecture into the modules and in a very simplest way, right? So yeah.
Okay, so on this certification, it's gonna be just a whole bunch of questions, right?
Yeah,
And the
so
questions are gonna be scenario based.
yeah, scenario based, definitely. For
So
it,
okay. So you have to
Mhm.
understand the concepts in order to answer the scenario based questions.
Definitely. That's why
So
that,
if that's the
yeah.
case, then
Hmm.
one thing we can do
Hmm.
is it possible to go through the questions and then
Right. I
find those
understand.
same things, those exact same
Sure.
things, or do those
Sure.
things in the AWS?
Sure. Okay. So basically, the MCQ structure are not in the properly in the alignment form. Let's suppose if the one MCQ is related to EC2, the second one is maybe AWS Lambda, third one is maybe related to pipeline, right? So there is no structure of these MCQs, right? So, but I know our actual or main end goal is to do certification, right? So what we are going to do in our next lecture, we are going to follow up these particular MCQs and we try to understand this concept in behind these MCQs, right? So we can easily understand the MCQs and understand the options and make the correct option, right?
Okay, so I think
So,
personally, what I know what how I learn best because I've done this
hmm,
with other concepts that I've learned recently that's worked well. I need to
hmm,
engage with this content more somehow because listening and watching you is
hmm,
it's just I don't think I'm getting much out of it. So like with Okta, let me
hmm,
just use that as an example.
right.
For months and months, I did this just like this, where someone was teaching me these concepts. I listened, I didn't learn nothing. Then
Right,
I started to take each question
right,
and I would sit with my coach and say, okay, Okta, it's this asking if I can do XYZ in Okta. Let's go to Okta, let's go to those settings, or let's set that thing up in Okta to see how to actually do it or how the settings are so that
right,
I can answer that question. And as I kept
right.
playing around with Okta over and over and over and over, clicking around, trying things, doing integrations, setting up configurations, is how I
Mm-hmm.
learned those concepts.
Right.
So is it possible to do this also with AWS? Is to where I can
Definitely.
basically take a question,
Right.
understand the question, go into AWS, go to those settings or set that configuration up, and then come back
Right.
and answer the question.
Definitely. Okay, we can follow this one. Right. That's
That
not a
way I
problem.
can see the question, understand what it's asking,
Yeah.
go and actually
Yeah.
do that work or find that setting or whatever it may be, then I can associate
Okay.
that with my hands-on part of it too,
Hmm.
and then think about the
Hmm.
question and then come back and answer to that question. Because
Yeah, that's for
otherwise, I
sure.
feel like even let's just say we just go through and do the hands-on stuff, then again,
Hmm.
I will have to go back to the question and associate the question with what I learned, which is another extra step I have to do.
Yeah.
Instead, I think it may make more sense if we associate the question directly with the hands-on as we tackle each question one by one.
Okay. 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 That's fine. That's fine. I understand. Okay. We can follow this method, definitely. Okay.
Okay. So let's make it question-based, focused.
Okay, sure.
And then maybe there is a way if you have any
Hmm.
if you can find a way to get all the questions, maybe you can clump them together into categories of things. Like for example, let's just say
Hmm.
there was, I don't know, 100 questions. And of that
Hmm.
100 question, you had the whole thing, and the 10 of them were related to how to set up a S3 bucket,
Hmm.
right? In order to do the set up the S3 bucket, we have to go through and do all these different things, right? Like set up the file, add it here, do this, configure this, right? This whole
Hmm.
process has to be done in order to answer the question, I'm sure, or some part of it, the question. So can we
Right.
clump those 10 questions together on this process? Do this process while answering those questions.
Right. Okay.
Something like that.
Okay, sure. We can follow this method. Actually,
Okay.
we are going. So what I am going to do, I will try to make all of this particular 50 to 100 MCQ into one file, right? And
Hmm.
then we are going to follow one MCQs one by one, right? And we do the implementation according to the MCQs, right? So we
Hmm.
we can easily understand the MCQs, and then we can understand the concept easily, right? So
Yes.
we
I
will
think I would pick
follow
this
this.
up way faster that way, man. Just
Yeah, yeah.
I did
Yeah,
the
I know
same
it
thing with
is.
Okta. It's worked really well for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay, Ravi. And
Okay, cool, man. Sounds
okay,
good.
Rafi. Yeah. Okay, Rafi, that's the end of the lecture. We will try to follow up the things, the same things,
Hmm.
as you said earlier. So we will understand easily, right?